It's become somewhat of a running joke on this channel that I take shots at The Cursed Child, the official sequel to the Harry Potter series, which according to J.K. Rowling is actually canon. I've made a few videos going over what makes it so bad, and they were pretty lengthy videos because there's just so much that went wrong. I've read this book 4 times if you count my reread for this video, and I've seen the stage play, so I've been immersed in the story for years because of my job. Having to go through it so many times and being such a big Harry Potter fan, I've of course thought about how this story could have been better. For those of you that don't know, I went to film school, and there I learned the art of storytelling. It was one of the things that intrigued me most about the process of making a movie. Now, all these years later, I have this huge platform filled with so many Potterheads from all around the world. And in this video, I'm going to rewrite The Cursed Child and hopefully make a story that Harry Potter fans can enjoy rather than despise. However, there is a catch. Just to make it harder on myself, I'm going to try to stick to the story that's already been written as best I can. So this is not my official sequel to the franchise because I have a lot of restrictions. Maybe one day I'll make my official sequel, but we'll save that for another video. Focusing on this one, I'm going to think of myself as an outside writer that they brought in to fix the mess that John Tiffany and Jack Thorne created, much like Warner Brothers brought Steve Kloves in to fix the script Rowling wrote for the third Fantastic Beasts film. Before we start, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Arc Studio. Arc Studio is a screenwriting software, and it's quickly gaining traction among industry professionals. It makes industry standard formatting simple, meaning it's great for those who are still learning the process of script writing. It excels at collaborative projects, being able to share it with a whole group of people, and it has a distraction-free interface. It offers 3 different plans for users. The free plan, making it accessible for anyone no matter what level you are, the essential plan, and the pro plan. And don't let the simplicity fool you, you'll be using what pros use. Kristen Link used Arc Studio to make Netflix's Arachne. And on top of that, I myself used this program to write a lot of my scripts, including the script for this very video. You can use the link below, which was made just for Movie Flame viewers, and you can focus on writing your story and let Arc Studio handle the rest. And speaking of scripts, let's get on with the video as I turn this garbage script into a script that Harry Potter fans can hopefully enjoy. The opening scene at King's Cross is fine the way it is. It plays off the epilogue from the original series nicely, and it adds what needed to be added, like the parents' conversation after the kids are on board. The first thing I'm going to change though is when the kids are on the train. Rose and Albus look for a seat and find Scorpius, and this is where the rumor that Scorpius is Voldemort's son comes out. The rumor states that Draco and Astoria could not get pregnant, so they used a time turner to go back in time, and there Astoria had sex with Voldemort and got pregnant with his baby, and then Draco and Astoria raised the baby, aka Scorpius, as their own, and all of this explains why Draco and Astoria kept him locked up in their house for most of his childhood. This is absolutely idiotic for so many reasons. First off, Scorpius is the spitting image of his father, blonde hair and all, and they even make note in the screenplay that Scorpius has his father's nose. Second, the fact that they would go back in time and use Voldemort of all people to father their child, it's just nonsense. And going off of that, why the hell would Voldemort agree to this? It's not like he needed an heir because he thought he would live forever. He didn't need anyone to carry on after he was gone. It's so ridiculous that you would think no one in the right mind would ever believe this rumor. But no, pretty much every character believes it, even Scorpius himself for a while. This rumor is brought up throughout the book over and over again, saying that Scorpius is bullied because of it, that all of these grown witches and wizards at the Ministry believe it and shun him for it, so much so that Harry even started a Ministry investigation to find out if it was true. Just look at him, Harry, it's clearly Draco's son, of course it's not true. So we're gonna change this rumor. The purpose of this rumor in the actual narrative is to bring about scrutiny for Scorpius, and there are so many other more plausible and believable rumors that can do this. So instead of the rumor being that Voldemort was his father, we're gonna make the rumor be that he was bitten by a werewolf as a kid. It's much more believable, especially because many werewolves were aligned with Voldemort, and seeing as Draco and his family betrayed Voldemort and his army, they would want revenge. This new rumor might even bring on more scrutiny for Scorpius than the other one, because werewolves are looked down upon in the Wizarding Society. And on top of that, it explains why Draco and Astoria kept Scorpius locked up in their house for all those years. So back to the plot. We're leaving Albus and Scorpius' friendship the way it is. We're keeping Albus in Slytherin because I think that's actually a really interesting plot point. And the first year is pretty much all the same, with Albus struggling to live up to his dad and being pretty unexceptional. Now, going back to Scorpius, his mother Astoria was of course sick, and I'm adding an addition to the story that plays off of that. During his first year at Hogwarts, I'm saying that Scorpius had to leave the school to see his sick mother, and unfortunately for him, the times he left happened to coincide with a few full moons, which exasperates the rumors that he's a werewolf. Now, obviously, he can't leave for every full moon because there are 12 a year, I believe, but considering the fact that people believed he was Voldemort's son when he was the spitting image of his father, and taking into account that time turners had been destroyed for over 20 years, I think there can be some flaws in the werewolf rumor too. With him being gone for a few full moons, people will latch onto that coincidence and run with the rumor even if it doesn't fully add up. We see that in the real world too. Moving on to platform 9 3/4 as Albus goes into his second year. In the play, Harry is signing autographs as he talks to his son. We're cutting that. That's so out of character for Harry. Throughout all of the books, it's shown that Harry does not enjoy his fame and never relishes in it. There was literally an entire plot point of how humiliated and angry Harry was when Lockhart and Draco made everyone think he was giving out signed photos. So no, Harry is not going to interrupt this deep conversation with his son to please a fan. We're gonna leave the rest of that conversation the same though, as Albus sort of breaks Harry's heart saying he didn't need him to drop him off, to which Harry responds saying, "But I wanted to be here." Following Albus walking off, in the original play, Draco approaches Harry asking for a favor. He asks Harry to put a stop to the rumors about his son by saying that all of the time turners were destroyed in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries during the 5th book. Obviously, our new rumor has nothing to do with time turners though, because as Draco just stated, they have been destroyed for over 20 years, so it would be idiotic to bring them back, wouldn't it? Oh wait. Oh god. Ugh.
Oh, hell no!
Anyway, instead of Draco asking Harry to say that all of the time turners were gone, we'll instead have Draco ask Harry to refer to the Werewolf Registration Act and tell the public that Scorpius is not on the list. Putting this in is a pretty genius move if I don't say so myself, because if you dig deep into Harry Potter lore, the Werewolf Registration Act was created by Newt Scamander, and it forced all werewolves to register with the Ministry so the government could keep track of them all. However, just as Harry said no with the original rumor, he says no here too, the reason being that all of those files are confidential to protect the werewolves' identities. During their second year, the rumor is brought up in potions class as Carl Jenkins looks at Albus and Scorpius and says, "Leave him and Voldemort's child to it, I say." We're gonna change this line to, "Leave him and the werewolf to it, I say." Moving on to the next scene, we join Albus and Harry on the platform again as Albus is about to go into his 3rd year. This scene can stay the same as Albus rips up his Hogsmeade permission form, then coldly walks off. We'll also keep his interaction with Scorpius about his mother's death the same as well. That was a nice and touching scene between the two boys. And now I'll take this time to fix the character of Ron a bit. Throughout the last few sequences, as well as some that are still to come, they make Ron really dumb. They throw things in like him holding his wand backwards toward himself instead of facing his enemy, or making him mess up Floo powder by ending up in the kitchens rather than McGonagall's office. Like, come on, he's been doing this all his life. He grew up in the wizarding world, there's no need to make him look this dumb. They also turned him into this jokester, almost like he's Fred and George. That's not Ron, no matter how many times they say, "He's a funny guy," or "Ron's Ron," you know, when he pulls a prank. Like, no, that's not Ron. Ron cracks a few jokes here and there, but it's a very different kind of humor than Fred and George's jokester sense of humor. So we're cutting all the jokester bits, and we're cutting everything that makes Ron look needlessly stupid. Now, this next scene is where it starts to get complicated. Harry comes to visit Hermione, who's Minister of Magic, and I think I'll keep that in the rewrite. Hermione is still Minister. In the play, the two talk about the time turner that Harry confiscated from Theodore Nott. As I said, we're cutting time travel and cutting all time turners completely, because as the script already stated, they've been gone for over 20 years. There is a reason Rowling wrote time turners out of the series. They just caused too many plot holes. Also, I'm just gonna take this time to take a few more shots at the play and show you why it just doesn't work, because it literally contradicts the thing that it's based around: time turners and time travel. According to official Harry Potter canon that was written before this book came out, if you go back in time and then come back to the present, you age the years in which you came back, meaning that when Albus and Scorpius went back to 1994, then came back to 2023, they should have aged 29 years. And considering the fact that they went back multiple times, let's look at Scorpius, who went back and forth the most. If you add everything up, he should have aged over 120 years. And this aging as you travel through time would have affected everyone else who time traveled as well. So Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Draco, and Delphi all should have aged considerably as well. Now that I've said that, let's go back to the scene with Harry and Hermione in Hermione's office. I'm going to rewrite this scene. We're still going to utilize Theodore Nod, but instead of him providing a time turner, he's going to provide us information. While interrogating him, Harry was told by Nott that a new threat was coming, which will ultimately be Delphi, but the audience does not know that yet. I'll get to Delphi in a bit. But first, we have to go over what Hermione told Harry in the original script. She says that Voldemort's old allies, trolls, giants, and werewolves have all been acting differently, almost as if they were preparing for something. And there's also the mention of giants having wing tattoos on their backs, which is of course the sign of the augury and the same tattoo that Delphi has. They bring all of this up, and all of this is really interesting, but they literally don't do anything with it. So I'm gonna make this information much more important than the original script did. So remember the trolls, giants, and werewolves, as well as the tattoos on the giant's back. Going back to the original play script, Hermione brings up all of the paperwork that Harry is refusing to read, saying, "But if the head of the magical law enforcement isn't reading his files," and Harry replies saying he doesn't want to read it, he just wants to be out in the action. We're going to accentuate this point more as well, so remember Harry not doing his paperwork. Also, I heard people saying that this was out of character for Harry, but actually I think this is one of the few things they got right. Throughout the original series, Harry always wants to be in the action because he has a hero complex. It's brought up in the Goblet of Fire with the second task, in the Order of the Phoenix with him saving Sirius, and a few other times as well. So I think him not wanting to do his homework and just going out and doing his thing, I think that's pretty accurate. In the next scene in the play, we see Amos Diggory visit Harry at his house, and he asks Harry to use the time turner the Ministry got, which he heard about through a rumor, and he asks him to go back in time and save his son Cedric. Obviously, we're not going with the time travel plotline, so we're gonna change this scene. Looking at the narrative, the purpose of this scene is that Albus hears something he doesn't like, and this encourages him to rebel and go against his father doing exactly what he said he wouldn't do. So in my rewrite, instead of him coming with a request, Amos is gonna come in with an accusation. In the original script, Amos said he heard a rumor about the Ministry having the time turner, but I'm going to rewrite this to Amos hearing rumors of Voldemort's old allies, the giants, trolls, and werewolves starting to fester, and he hears that Harry is refusing to read all of his reports because he just wants to be out in the action. In my rewrite, Harry replies telling Amos not to tell him how to do his job, and I'm going to make Amos reply with the best line in the entire script: "How many people have to die for the boy who lived?" But with my rewrite, this is not only about Cedric, but also the entire Wizarding World, as Harry neglects his duties as the head of the magical law enforcement. Just like in the original script, Albus heard this whole conversation while listening at the stairs, and he begins to resent his dad for not acting how Albus thought he should, and then in comes Delphi. Now, Delphi is a character who we're going to make a ton of changes to. First of all, she's not going to be Voldemort's daughter. Voldemort did not have sex. That's the most ridiculous and most disgusting thing I've ever heard.
It's disgusting.
Excuse me, I have to go and vomit.
Instead, her father is going to be Rodolphus Lestrange, the husband of Bellatrix. He was already involved in her life and in the original script as he told her the prophecy, so we're gonna push his role up a bit and make him the father. Now, Bellatrix and Rodolphus pretty much only got married so that Bellatrix could fulfill her parents' pure-blood marriage traditions, but even though they didn't love each other, I know they were banging on the side, I just know it. So they had a little mishap, and Bellatrix became pregnant with Delphi, but I'm going to push the timeline up. In the original script, it had her be born right before the Battle of Hogwarts, but if that were the case, Bellatrix would have been visibly pregnant during the Malfoy Manor scene, and seeing the way she moves and fights, someone who is 7 months pregnant could not do that. So I'm gonna be nice and skip over just how poor Thorne and Tiffany's writing and planning is, and I'm gonna have Bellatrix give birth to Delphi in secret about a week before the Malfoy Manor scene. Also, about Delphi's bluish gray hair, that sounds like something a 7-year-old writing Harry Potter fanfiction would come up with, especially because both Bellatrix and Voldemort had black hair. Where did the bluish gray come from? According to canon, that's her natural hair color, she didn't dye it. So instead, in my rewrite, she's going to have black hair like her mother. Also, let's take this time to go over Delphi's plan and the prophecy. The prophecy in the original script was just so awkward. Here, I'll read it for you guys. "When spares are spared, when time is turned, when unseen children murder their fathers, then will the Dark Lord return." So breaking it down, it's saying if you save Cedric, Albus will kill Harry when he changes time, and Voldemort will be reborn. We're changing this entirely. The new prophecy that I just created goes as follows. "When the augury rules, the cursed child must fall, for only then can the augury stand tall. But to triumph this feat, the 3 old allies of the Dark Lord must have a chance to defeat." Honestly, I wrote this in about 5 minutes and I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's way better than the original script with not just how it sounds, but also with how plausible it could be. Also, adding the cursed child to the prophecy was a huge missed opportunity on their part if you ask me, so I decided to reference the title of the book in my prophecy. Going back to the plot, Delphi and Albus's conversation is pretty much the same, but I'm going to change the ending a bit. In the original script, she told Albus to come to St. Oswald sometime, but I'm cutting that. The next time they meet, it will be a coincidence, or so Albus thought. Delphi of course planned to run into him. Also, speaking of Delphi's plan, she of course had Amos under the Imperius curse, and I'm keeping that the same. Delphi controlled Amos during his conversation with Harry, Delphi intending to get a rise out of Albus, who in my rewrite is also the cursed child from my prophecy. Now, I'm going to add an entire scene after this, as Albus and Scorpius meet in Diagon Alley to get their school supplies, just as Harry, Ron, and Hermione did so many times in the original series. I think it would be cool to add one more location having Diagon Alley. It's always a treat to go back there. While there, they run into Delphi, which again Delphi planned, and she talks to them about a werewolf meeting she heard about. She says that the Ministry and Harry has refused to go to the meeting as they don't have proof of any wrongdoing, so they could not arrest anyone. Delphi says that they should go because if they can get dirt on them, the Ministry will have cause to arrest them, and she points out to Albus how great it would be if he was able to do something that his father refused to do. With that statement combined with Delphi flirting with Albus a bit, he considers joining her, which is actually something I took from the original play. That's not my addition. Delphi did flirt with him to get what she wanted. I just placed it in this added scene that I created. However, before Albus commits, Scorpius talks him out of it. As they part ways, Delphi tells them where to meet her if they change their mind, and I'm going to keep the fact that this meeting place Delphi just told them about just so happens to be on the route of the Hogwarts Express. We then cut back to the play's next scene as Harry gives Albus his baby blanket, which Albus refuses. In the play, after Albus says he wishes Harry wasn't his dad, Harry's next line is, "Well, there are times I wish you weren't my son." We're not gonna have Harry say this. This is way too extreme and so out of character. I'm going to rewrite this line to something more believable. After Albus says he wishes Harry weren't his dad, Harry instead says, "There are times you disappoint me too, son." Like in the original script, this conversation pushes Albus over the edge and he decides to join Delphi. Instead of going back in time to save Cedric though, they're going to the werewolf meeting. Now, Harry has these dreams throughout the play, and all of them involve Voldemort's voice saying his name. But for my rewrite, there is going to be no trace of Voldemort in the story. We've seen him for 7 books. We don't need the same villain coming back. As I said, I changed Delphi's father, so Voldemort is out and the real villain and threat is Delphi and Delphi alone. She's a very interesting character, and I think she deserves her own arc, free of past villains from the original series. Also, about these dreams, I'm cutting Harry's scar hurting. Adding this was straight up disrespectful to the original series, because it ruins the final line. All was well, his scar hadn't hurt in years, keep it that way. And one last thing, the play had Harry speaking Parseltongue again, but this should not be possible. As Rowling herself stated, the only reason he had that power was because of the Horcrux inside of him, but that Horcrux left his body over 20 years ago, so there is no reason why he should still have this power. Parseltongue is out as well. Back to the story. I'm keeping Albus and Scorpius jumping off the train, but we're cutting the Trolley Witch chasing them, turning her fingers into claws, and using her pumpkin pasties as bombs. I don't know what they were smoking when writing this, but it's ridiculous and we're getting rid of it. To replace this, I'm going to add another form of excitement. Albus and Scorpius have the task of distracting James so they can steal the invisibility cloak from him. I think this would be pretty suspenseful, and I figure Albus stole it later on in the actual script, so we might as well have him steal it a bit earlier, and I do have a plan for it, so remember that he has the cloak. So with that little sequence paired with them climbing out of a window of a moving train, going on the roof, and jumping off, I think that's plenty of excitement even without the Trolley Witch. So they go to where Delphi had instructed them to go, and she's ecstatic to see them. She tells them the bad news that she doesn't know where the meeting is, only when. So just like in the original script, they have to break into the Ministry of Magic, but instead of going to Hermione's office to get the time turner, they go to Harry's office as he's the head of magical law enforcement, so he would have the location of the meeting. Now, in both my rewrite and in the original script, they succeed in getting what they need from the Ministry, but I'm changing the fact that they use Polyjuice Potion, because I just don't think that's very feasible. It took the trio months to make it, and also how they got the hair they needed was really unrealistic. So instead, they used the invisibility cloak that they stole from James. At this point in the story, I'm keeping it relatively the same as Harry and Ginny get word that Albus and Scorpius did not arrive at Hogwarts, but instead of getting this news while at their house, they're at the Ministry of Magic. They go to Harry's office to talk, and there, Harry sees the files that reveal the location of the werewolf meeting on his desk. Ginny then says, very tentatively, that she received an owl from James saying that he had lost the invisibility cloak that his dad gave him, and Harry begins to put things together. Ginny thinks that it's unlikely that they're at the werewolf meeting, but Harry says either way, they have to go. As they're leaving his office though, they run into Draco, as he too had gotten word that his son did not arrive at Hogwarts. They walk and talk as Harry fills him in, and on their way they see Ron and Hermione, and they say that they're going too because it's family. Going back to Albus, Scorpius, and Delphi, in the original script, this is where they began their first mission, which took them to the Forbidden Forest, but this is a plot hole. The Forbidden Forest is part of the Hogwarts grounds, and it's pretty much impossible to make your way into Hogwarts without permission. You could maybe make the argument that Albus and Scorpius could get in because they were students, but there's no way Delphi would have been able to come in. So instead of going to Hogwarts, they go straight to the location of the werewolf meeting, which takes them to another forest unrelated to the school. On their way, I'm keeping the part where Delphi kisses Albus on the cheek, which then upsets Scorpius. When they get to the werewolf meeting, they watch from afar as the meeting commences. The head werewolf is making a speech, and they say how the wizarding world has shunned them for years, even with the new regime. They say that they were always treated better when dark witches and wizards were in power, and the lead werewolf says that they might have a chance for this again under the leadership of the Augury. He explains that the Augury works in the shadows, but he thinks they're the real deal, and at this point you have to remember the audience does not know that Delphi is the Augury. Delphi says that she wants a closer look, but tells them to stay there. After a little more flirting with Albus, Albus gives Delphi the invisibility cloak, and she makes her way to the werewolf pack. While she's gone, Albus and Scorpius overhear one of the werewolves saying that the trolls, who have also aligned themselves with the Augury, have made their way to the Alps. As they're listening though, Delphi, who's still under the cloak, accidentally but really on purpose makes a noise that makes the werewolves turn around and see the two boys. Her plan works as the werewolves go after them, making one of the 3 former allies of the Dark Lord have an attempt at defeating the cursed child, just as the prophecy said. This is where things go wrong. Albus and Scorpius are sighted by the pack, and they have to run. They hold their own surprisingly well, but it's clear it won't be enough. Just then, Harry, Ginny, Ron, Hermione, and Draco all show up, and a huge battle breaks out. When Albus and Scorpius are surrounded, one of the werewolves looks at Scorpius and says, "It's time to make those rumors come true. Capture the boy and hold him hostage for the next full moon. It's about time a Malfoy pays for his betrayal." But all of a sudden, the two boys vanish on the spot with a crack. All of the adults are so shocked that they freeze, and in their hesitation, Ron is whacked in the face and lands hard on his arm, breaking it. Hermione runs over to Ron to make sure he's okay, and she tells everyone to retreat, and with a crack, they're all gone. Now, going over Ron breaking his arm, this in my rewrite replaces the outcome of him marrying Padma instead of Hermione when time changed. I felt something had to happen to Ron. We then cut to an open field, and Albus and Scorpius appear out of nowhere. Delphi then rips off the cloak while Albus and Scorpius are hunched over sick, and we realize that she had grabbed them while under the cloak and disapparated. Delphi, manipulating them and lying, says that this plot is bigger than they could have ever imagined, and Scorpius agrees, saying, "Especially with this augury we heard about." Albus then brings up what they had overheard Amos say. Not only are the werewolves aligning with the augury, but trolls and giants are as well. This sparks something for Scorpius, as he mentions what they overheard about the trolls in the Alps, and just like the outcome after their first mission in the original script, he again says that they have to move on and keep going against his father. But while in the play that was going back in time again, here in my script it's checking out the trolls in the Alps. Cutting back to the adults, we find them in the headmaster's office with McGonagall. They discuss how they disapparated away because neither knew how to do this very advanced piece of magic, and on top of that, both of them still had the trace on them, so the ministry would know if they did it. All of the adults ponder this very curiously and very suspiciously. Ron is now in a sling, but he says he's alright and that it was just like old times. This line piques Draco's interest, and I'm adding a conversation that took place much later in the play here. Draco says he was always jealous of the trio's friendship, and this moves Harry, Ron, and Hermione. This was originally only said to Harry and Ginny, but I think having Ron and Hermione hear it as well makes it have more meaning. McGonagall then cuts in, and I'm going to have her say that the trio's friendship was one of the most special friendships she had seen in all of her years of teaching. After that, everyone leaves the headmaster's office, but Harry stays back. While alone in there, he talks to Dumbledore's portrait just like in the play, but obviously with my rewrite, this takes place in the headmaster's office, not in the hospital wing like in the original script. They have the same conversation about how to deal with his son Albus and how Harry feels guilty about what he said to his son. But remember, we changed what he said, so that's a tiny rewrite right there. On top of that, I'm going to combine their later conversation with this one. So this is where the two tell each other that they love one another. I thought that was a really sweet moment in the play, and I wanted to leave it in my rewrite. We're also going to add something here too. I'm writing in that Dumbledore says, "You cannot know exactly what will happen with you and your son, Harry. That is why divination is the most, shall we say, inconsistent branch of magic." This then gives Harry an idea to seek an expert, and seeing as he saw Trelawney to be a complete fraud, he went to seek the other divination professor, Ferenz the Centaur. When he goes to the Forbidden Forest though, he instead meets Bane, and this is where the two have their conversation that was in the play, though a little bit later in the plot. Just like in the original script, Bane tells Harry that his son is surrounded by a black cloud, which was either something or someone. Because Harry had not spotted Delphi as she was under the invisibility cloak, he suspects Scorpius to be the Black Cloud, which is not a rewrite. That also happened in the original script. Now, during this time in the play, we have Harry being a complete jerk to Ginny and McGonagall, which is very out of character. He's straight up heartless as he brings up McGonagall not having kids of her own, meaning she didn't understand his parenting, which is a low blow because she tragically lost the love of her life very early. Harry also threatened Hogwarts, saying he would bring the full weight of the ministry down on the school if McGonagall did not fill his completely unreasonable requests. I'm cutting this, because this is just so wrong. This is the school he loves, the place that was his escape, his home. There's no way that Harry would threaten Hogwarts nor McGonagall like that. And he's also awful to Ginny here too, so much so that she's unsure of what he's become. This is not the Harry we know and love, so we're changing this. Instead of him being awful to McGonagall and Ginny here, we're going to have him take his anger out on Draco, which is much more believable given their history. As he leaves the forest after his talk with Bane, he runs into Malfoy. With the new information he just got, he tells Draco that Scorpius is a dark cloud around his sun, and I'm pretty much just going to take Harry's conversation with Albus about this and replace Albus with Draco, and both conversations end in the same way, as Harry says if and when they get their boys back, Albus can't see Scorpius any longer. Then I'm going to combine another conversation between Harry and Draco with this one, as Harry says he's going to use his power at the Ministry to investigate the rumors about Scorpius and expose them. If you remember though, we changed the rumor from him being Voldemort's child to him being a werewolf. And unlike in the play where Harry looks dumb as hell for believing this rumor because Scorpius is the spitting image of his father, here in my rewrite, he actually has a reason to believe the rumors because as he just saw, it looked like Scorpius had dragged his son Albus to a werewolf meeting, meaning that Scorpius was one of them. So anyway, back to the standoff between Harry and Draco. I'm going to combine another scene from the play here where Harry and Draco duel one another, but instead of it taking place much later and in Harry and Ginny's kitchen, it's going to take place on the edge of the Forbidden Forest where Harry ran into Draco. The duel is put to a stop immediately though when Ginny, Hermione, and Ron show up. Once they've all gathered themselves, they agree that tensions are high because they're so worried about their kids. There's unanimous agreement as they all have horrified looks on their faces, all fearing the worst. We then cut back to Albus, Scorpius, and Delphi as they arrive at the Alps to see the trolls. This little mission in my rewrite replaces them going back to the second task in the original script. When they get there, it takes them a long time to find the trolls, but eventually they hear some roars that they're able to follow, and they stumble upon a whole colony of trolls. They ask each other what the plan is, and Delphi says they should go through their caves and look at the pictures they drew on the walls, as it might give them insight on the trolls' plans with the augury. Albus then says that Delphi should have the invisibility cloak to make sure she's safe. This is somewhat of a romantic gesture that sort of gets to Scorpius, and this replaces Scorpius announcing Albus's feelings for Delphi out loud like in the original script. Come on guys, show don't tell. It's the #1 rule you have to follow when writing, but for some reason Thorne and Tiffany just aren't good at following this rule in the play. So, Albus and Scorpius go off together, and they make their way to a cave. They see some drawings of wings, which the audience of course remembers Hermione mentioning, saying it was on the backs of the giants. Once again, while under the cloak, Delphi makes a loud noise next to the boys, which alerts the trolls to their presence. Albus and Scorpius run for it, and there are some close calls, but just when it looks like the end, Delphi, seeing that the trolls had a fair play at the cursed child, she grabs them and disapparates. And in the play, this is where that hellish alternate reality culminates. In this alternate world, Cedric was humiliated, which in turn made him become a Death Eater. Then, during the Battle of Hogwarts, Cedric killed Neville Longbottom, meaning Neville did not kill the final Horcrux, so Harry lost, Voldemort won, and all that was left of the resistance was Snape, Hermione, and Ron. We're cutting all of this because this is all absolute garbage. Even if Cedric was humiliated, he would never become a Death Eater. Winning was not that important to him.
Go on, take it. You saved me, take it.
Let's look at the third book. Cedric caught the snitch when playing against Gryffindor, but after seeing that Harry fell off his broomstick, he wanted to throw the game and have a rematch, but Wood said no because they won fair and square. And if Wood said they won fair and square, you know that they won fair and square. So Cedric was about to throw away a win just like that. Cedric was always a good sport. Also, he's the sweetest guy in the world, and he's a Hufflepuff for God's sake. There is no reality where Cedric would turn to the dark side, no matter what happens to him. Furthermore, why the hell is Snape still alive? Cedric killing Neville would not change anything for Snape. Voldemort still would have killed him to get the Elder Wand. There is no logical explanation of why he's still there. So I'm cutting all of that, and instead of having Snape make a cameo, we're gonna bring in someone who isn't dead. Lucius Malfoy. And we'll come back to this just as soon as we check in with Albus, Scorpius, and Delphi. They apparate to another mountaintop, which stands above a small wizarding town. The boys are shaken up, but Delphi seems to be fine. Scorpius starts yelling, saying he's done with this. They had almost been killed twice now. However, he immediately stops when he hears a roar from not too far away. They make their way over and peek over a large rock where they spot a lone giant. Albus suspiciously asks Delphi why she brought them here, but Delphi says nothing. Scorpius then points out the wings tattooed on the giant's back, and as Scorpius says this, Albus notices the wings tattooed on Delphi's neck. He suddenly gets very tense, and I'm going to keep this part of the story relatively the same as the boys slowly discover that she's the augury, and these wings are the sign of the augury. Obviously though, instead of being in the Owlery at Hogwarts, it takes place on these mountains. Also, instead of Scorpius remembering the augury logo on a flag in the alternate reality, they instead recognize it from the trolls' drawings and of course on the giant's back that's right in front of them. Once the boys put everything together, they run for it and Delphi follows. We then cut to Harry at the Ministry as he has a meeting with Lucius Malfoy. Lucius explains how, with his grandson missing, he called in a few favors from his old contacts, all of whom Harry knew were made through shady and sketchy means, but he pushes past this. He tells Harry that his people tracked down a girl named Delphi Diggory, who has suspiciously been linked to the recent giants, werewolves, and trolls' unusual movements. This sparks Harry's memory of Amos's nurse and niece, who, just like in the original script, was there when Amos went to talk to Harry. Them going to Amos and Amos saying that he has no niece can all stay the same, and asking them raiding Delphi's room at St. Oswald's where she's pretending to be a nurse. Of course though, the prophecy that they find is instead my prophecy, not the one from the play. Also, they don't find out that she's Voldemort's daughter, but rather the daughter of Rodolphus and Bellatrix. Looking at the prophecy, they put together that the kids had already seen the werewolves, and it must have been Delphi who disapparated them away while under the invisibility cloak that Albus stole from James. Because Delphi had already taken the boys to the werewolves, it narrowed their options down. They're either going to the trolls or the giants, and luckily they guessed right, choosing to go after the giants. Thanks to their high-ranking roles in the Ministry, they know exactly where the giants have been spotted last, and they decide to go. As they leave though, Harry pulls Draco aside and apologizes for thinking that Scorpius was a werewolf. Draco forgives him, and just like in the original script, they look at each other as friends. We then cut back to Scorpius and Albus, who have run down to the wizarding town below the mountains. An older wizard sees them and asks them if they're okay. Before they can answer though, Delphi hits the man with the killing curse. This is my rewrite for Craig's death, who Delphi of course killed while on the Hogwarts grounds. And I might as well point out that this is another plot hole made by Thorne and Tiffany. Again, Delphi somehow got into Hogwarts, and the only explanation the writers gave us was Delphi saying that the school had lax security, which is the laziest bit of writing I've ever seen. Hogwarts has been said to be the safest place on Earth.
Take no safer place, not one, except perhaps Hogwarts.
So no, it doesn't have lax security. You're just a really bad writer who didn't do any research whatsoever. You don't know anything about the Harry Potter franchise. Who gave these guys the job to write the official sequel to the Harry Potter franchise? Anyway, this older wizard is an innocent bystander just like Craig, and just like after Craig's death, the boys now know that Delphi is not messing around. Just like in the original script, Delphi uses the boys' friendship to her advantage. She uses the torture curse on Scorpius multiple times, which makes Albus agree to go back up with her to the giants. She magically ties them up and starts up the mountain, and this replaces her tying them up magically to take them to the third task in the maze. In my rewrite, Delphi drops the two tied up boys for the giants to have, but as we learn from Hagrid's adventures with the giants, there's a certain way you must approach them, and she did not do it the correct way, especially because she's a human, and giants hate humans. This makes the giants ignore the boys and instead go after Delphi. The giants going after her is my rewrite of Cedric taking her down in the maze. She tried to use Cedric to further the prophecy, and here in my story, she tried to use the giants to further my prophecy, and in both, it led to the two people she was using take her down. Karma's a bitch. Delphi, being as powerful as she is though, escapes and takes the two boys who were still tied up with her. We then cut to below the mountains as Harry, Draco, Ginny, Ron, and Hermione apparate in. They hear the roars of the giants above, and they all race toward it, the roars telling them exactly where to go. Going back to Delphi, Scorpius, and Albus, we see the boys still tied up, and right here is where I'm putting the conversation that they had in the maze during the third task. The difference is though that the prophecy in my rewrite didn't work because the giants never went after the boys, they only went after Delphi, meaning the 3 former allies of the Dark Lord didn't have a chance to get to the cursed child, only 2 did, the trolls and the werewolves. But just like Scorpius did in the maze, he gives Delphi the idea that the prophecy doesn't need to be fulfilled for her to take over. This of course gave Delphi the idea to go back to 1981 in the original script, but in my rewrite, this instead makes her realize that she does not need to destroy the cursed child if she takes down the Minister of Magic and the head of magical law enforcement, and she can use the cursed child as bait. If she does that, she can take over as she pleases. Just then, the adults arrive, and Delphi, a bit flustered, says she's not ready. She tells the parents to go where it all began, and she disapparates with the boys. After a bit of discussion, they put together that she was born at Malfoy Manor, so that's where it began. And even though they know it's a trap, they agree they all have to go there to save the boys. I figure that in the play, the final fight took place in a meaningful location to the series in Godric's Hollow, so I wanted to ensure that my final fight happened in some other meaningful place to the original series. And what better place than Malfoy Manor? While Delphi prepares for the adults, Scorpius and Albus have a heart-to-heart about how much they mean to one another, which again I would take word for word from the original screenplay. They did a good job developing the boys' relationship. What Delphi didn't take into account was how well Scorpius knew this house, because this was the house of his grandparents. When Albus gets one of his arms free, as the ropes have loosened a bit over time, Scorpius then remembers a secret passageway right in the corner where they are, and Albus is able to get to it with his free arm. The 2 boys then escape, and Delphi sees this only a second too late, but when she looks out the window, she realizes that doesn't matter, as she sees that the adults have all arrived. As they walk on the side of the house, Albus and Scorpius come out of a wall, which is where the secret passageway led. After they fully untie them, the boys say they want to help in the fight, but the adults say no. Draco and Harry tell their sons to hide and stay hidden while they went to finish Delphi off. The adults have a plan, as Draco says they can sneak back into the house through the same passageway that the boys came out of. Meanwhile, just like in the original script, Harry goes to face Delphi head on and all alone. The final fight is relatively the same, only instead of being in a church in Godric's Hollow, they're in Malfoy Manor, and instead of Delphi locking the door so the others can't enter, she seals off the hidden passageway. After ensuring that they couldn't enter, she looks at Harry and says, "Did you think I was that stupid, you fool?" And taking a break from my phenomenal voice acting, in my rewrite, she did not just lock the door the way she did in the play, because that's so dumb. The first time I read the play and heard that she shut them out, I was like, oh yeah, she didn't just lock the door, she did something else to it. Otherwise, they could just use the spell that Hermione learned in her first year at Hogwarts. But then I was shocked and disappointed when Albus went up to the door and used that very spell. Why didn't they try to unlock the door with magic? They just let Harry get his ass kicked. And speaking of Harry getting his ass kicked, we'll keep that relatively the same in my rewrite, but the reason why he's losing is because Delphi set traps for him, knowing he would come. Looking at the original script, there is no way you expect me to believe that a grown Harry Potter, who was the head of the magical law enforcement and who had the element of surprise on his side, got knocked down and crawled away like a coward. Anyway, I'm keeping the fact that Albus's arrival saves his dad, but instead of coming through the floorboard like in the play, he just bursts in the same door that Harry came through. Meanwhile, let's have Scorpius actually do something, because he didn't do a thing in the play's final battle. So we're going to have Scorpius come in and unseal the trap door, which just to be clear was not just locked, it was magically sealed from only Delphi's side. Scorpius getting the trap door open then allows everyone to come out, and just like in the play when they stand together, they take Delphi down once and for all. Now, I'm going to leave out Delphi begging them to kill her, because she's a less tragic character in my rewrite. Here, she's not Voldemort's daughter, so she was driven by her lust for domination, not her lust to be with her dad. After the fight is over in the play, this is where Albus and Ginny hold Harry as he watches his parents die, but obviously he can't watch that because that was over 30 years ago, so instead the family just hugs, happy to be safe. I'm going to keep the ending pretty much as is, but I'll add a few things. Scorpius and Draco hug after the battle, which is taken right from the play, but I'm also going to add a conversation that they had earlier in the script. Scorpius tells his father that his late mother said the bravest thing she had ever seen was Draco standing up for her to his father, as well as Astoria telling Scorpius that Draco had more good in him than he could see. And I'm adding a small part to this for my story. I'm gonna have Scorpius say to Draco, "After tonight, I finally see what Mom meant." I always thought Astoria's quote was a nice moment, but unfortunately, this was only said in the alternate reality, so it was wiped away. Instead, we're gonna make this nice quote happen in the normal timeline. Moving on, just like at the end of the original script, Albus and Scorpius hug each other and have a nice moment. As for Scorpius and Rose, I'm cutting their relationship entirely. I don't think that was earned in the original narrative. There was barely anything that touched upon them, so that's out. And I'm leaving the final scene with Harry and Albus the way it is. They actually had a really nice wrap up. They go for a walk and they become closer than ever. However, instead of going to Cedric's grave, I'm going to have them go to Godric's Hollow to see Albus's grandparents' grave. See, I was able to incorporate Godric's Hollow after all. I'm keeping Harry touching Albus's shoulder as well as the final dialogue. I thought that was a nice ending. And there it is, how I would fix the cursed child. I pretty much wrote this in 2 days time, though they were 2 very long days, but I'm happy with the result. I think the prophecy is what I'm most proud of, which of course goes along with Delphi's ultimate plan, which I'm also pretty proud of. I obviously had a lot of restrictions as it had to coincide with the already established script. As I said, this is not the sequel I would make. This was just me fixing the script to please myself and hopefully other Harry Potter fans. But let me know what you guys think. Did you guys like the changes I made? Did you like my story? Did you dislike them? Leave a comment below and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can follow me on Instagram to see more of my personal life, like my cute dog Loki, and some behind the scenes movie flame stuff. I also do similar content on TikTok and Twitter that I do here on this channel, so if you like what I do here, check them out. All the handles are right below me, and links are in the description. Over here are my wonderful patrons. If you want to be featured on the next video, plus get a few other perks, become a patron today. As always, if you liked the video, hit that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great movie flame videos on the way.